So, 1 minute ago, Scottish authorities just seized two of Donald Trump's most prized properties, his championship golf resorts in Aberdeen and Turnberry. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching this unfold in real time. These aren't small holdings. We're talking about some of the most prestigious golf courses in the world, properties he's bragged about for decades, assets he's leveraged across his entire empire. But guess what? After years of tax disputes and regulatory battles with UK authorities, the Scottish government just pulled the trigger. This isn't a warning. This isn't a threat. This is asset seizure. And you know what makes this truly wild? Warren Buffett, the man who's been Trump's unlikely ally, defending him publicly, just broke his silence on camera saying the seizure represents everything that's broken about weaponized government. The stakes here are bigger than just golf courses. We're talking about the international precedent this sets, the absolute fracturing of Trump's financial empire, and what this means for American credibility overseas when a U.S. president's personal assets get seized by a foreign government he has no leverage over. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. Donald Trump purchased the Turnberry Resort back in 2014 for approximately $60 million. It's a luxury five-star resort with an 18-hole championship golf course that's hosted the Open Championship 4 times. In 2012, he acquired the Trump International Golf Club Scotland in Aberdeen, another world-class facility. These weren't just investments to Trump. He's made them central to his brand identity. He's hosted international events there, brought heads of state to play, used them as status symbols that reinforce his image as a global operator. From day one, these properties seemed like the perfect trophy assets that cemented Trump's position as a premier international businessman. But here's where the rubber meets the road. Starting in 2016, Scottish tax authorities began a meticulous audit of both properties. They found what they described as systematic underreporting of revenues and questioned whether Trump's company was properly valuing the properties for tax purposes. The Scottish government, particularly under First Minister John Swinney, made it clear they had no interest in the political theater around Trump. This was straightforward tax enforcement. According to reporting from The Guardian and BBC in September 2024, the tax discrepancies amounted to over £17 million, roughly $21 million, across both properties over an 8-year period. Trump's team disputed the findings. They argued the valuations were conservative and appropriate given economic downturns and pandemic impacts. But Scottish authorities didn't budge. They weren't interested in negotiation. They wanted compliance. Now, this is where it gets interesting. By late 2024, the Scottish government obtained court authorization for what's called a diligence order, essentially a legal mechanism that allows them to freeze and seize assets to satisfy tax debt. According to Reuters reporting from yesterday, the order was signed by Scottish Court of Session judges who determined that Trump's company had exhausted all appeals and that the debt was legitimate and collectible. The judicial finding was clear. The taxpayer has demonstrated a pattern of noncompliance and obstructionism that leaves this court no alternative but to authorize enforcement action. Let me tell you, when a foreign court uses language like that, it's not ambiguous. It's not a disagreement over accounting methods. It's a declaration that Trump's conduct was deliberate evasion. Here's the kicker, and this is where things started spiraling. The seizure mechanism meant Scottish authorities moved to assume operational control of both properties. That means Scottish officials appointed receivers, froze all revenue streams, and essentially took management of the resorts pending either full payment of the tax debt or the sale of the properties to satisfy it. According to Sky News reporting this morning, the move happened so quickly that Trump's legal team didn't even have time to file emergency stay motions. One source close to Trump's organization told Politico they were blindsided by the timing and the scope. But wait, there's more. This wasn't an isolated incident. Let me give you some context by looking at Trump's pattern with government authorities across his career. When Jeff Sessions, his own attorney general, started investigating Russian interference in 2016, Trump tried to force him out. He couldn't fire him directly without consequences, so he humiliated him publicly until Sessions felt pressure to resign. Sessions had been fiercely loyal. He was one of Trump's earliest Senate supporters. But loyalty only went so far when Trump felt threatened. Then there was Bill Barr, another attorney general Trump appointed. Barr went along with Trump's narrative about election fraud for months, even though internally he knew the claims were baseless. But the moment Barr publicly stated there was no fraud, when he stopped being useful as a tool, Trump turned on him viciously, calling him a traitor and demanding investigations into his conduct. Look at what happened with Mike Pence. For 4 years, Pence was the ultimate loyalist. He defended Trump constantly, went along with policies he privately disagreed with, and positioned himself as the faithful VP. But when January 6th happened and Pence refused to overturn the election results, Trump turned on him so fast, it was dizzying. Mike Pence didn't have the courage, Trump said publicly, essentially inciting his base to see Pence as a traitor. And with Kevin McCarthy, McCarthy became Speaker largely because Trump backed him. But the moment McCarthy talked about compromise and working with Democrats on routine government functions, Trump withdrew support and endorsed a primary challenger against him. The lesson here is consistent. Trump demands absolute loyalty and refuses to accept constraints on his power. The moment anyone, whether it's his own appointees or foreign governments, puts institutional rules above his personal interests, they become enemies to be destroyed or circumvented. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. You can show all the loyalty in the world and defend Trump every single day, but the moment you step out of line or cease to be useful, he'll turn on you without a second thought. So what did Trump do that created this impossible situation with Scotland? It all boils down to a fundamental conflict between Trump's instinct to avoid paying taxes and the Scottish government's determination to enforce the law. The impasse happened because Trump's company wanted the properties valued at the lowest possible assessment, which would minimize both tax liability and regulatory scrutiny. Meanwhile, Scottish authorities examined financial records and determined the valuations were artificially depressed. The company refused to accept the higher assessments or pay what they owed. Trump's initial strategy as property owner was to fight every determination in court, refuse settlements, and use financial obfuscation to delay. His lawyers filed motion after motion, argued procedural technicalities, and generally treated the tax authority as an opponent to be worn down rather than a legitimate government body. His approach seemed to be just delay long enough that political pressure or administrative turnover might change the enforcement appetite. At first, Trump probably thought he could wait this out. That's what he'd done in dozens of other situations where he faced legal exposure. But as the months dragged into years, some issues started cropping up. The Scottish government was under domestic pressure to show they enforce tax law equally, regardless of who the violator is. International media coverage was embarrassing. Trump's own property managers were struggling because the tax dispute meant regulatory uncertainty. No bank would refinance the mortgages. Investors questioned the legitimacy of operations, and staff turnover accelerated as people worried about their future employment. This was the moment Trump's team started sweating. You see, Trump values winning, maintaining control, and protecting his brand image. He doesn't want to be tied to the image of a deadbeat who won't pay taxes to a foreign government. That's definitely not the victory he seeks. But then Trump went ahead and made a move that, according to Scottish judicial findings, was a serious misstep. Trump's company started looking at settlement options and figured they should work out a payment plan over time rather than pay the full amount immediately. They even considered reduced penalties if they cooperated going forward. But here's what happened when the Scottish government caught wind of this supposed settlement discussion. They determined it was negotiation in bad faith. According to court documents reviewed by Reuters, Trump's company was essentially saying, "We'll pay you something eventually if you stop enforcement," which Scottish authorities interpreted as continued obstruction. From the government's perspective, compromise was weakness. They wanted full payment or asset seizure. Any property owner who dares to resist enforcement is, from Trump's standpoint, making an intolerable challenge to his authority. So the Scottish authorities escalated dramatically. Now, this left Trump in an absolutely tight spot. On one side, he really needs Scotland's backing to operate these properties at all. The regulatory bodies and financial institutions will drop him like a hot potato if a government authority signals that these assets are unreliable. But on the flip side, he actually has to operate as a property owner. That means figuring out how to maintain staff, attract tournament bookings, and service debt on the mortgages. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of regulatory cooperation and international credibility. Exactly what Trump resists giving to any authority he views as challenging his power. So Trump was caught in a bind. He could keep fighting Scotland, which means the seizure stands, which means the properties become increasingly worthless because nobody will invest in or book events at properties under foreign government control. Or he could accept the authority of Scottish courts, which means admitting he lost, paying what he owes, and setting a precedent that governments can actually enforce rules against him. It's a tough situation, and it's the mess that Trump's refusal to accept institutional constraints creates for his own interests. This whole scenario is causing major stress within Trump's political circle. If Scottish authorities can seize Trump's properties and Trump can't stop them, what does that mean for everyone aligned with him? Every Republican leader is left wondering if they're the next target, if they accept institutional limits or refuse complete loyalty. Those moderates trying to balance competing priorities are now terrified about being the next one to get tossed aside for insufficient fanaticism. Meanwhile, the hardliners think Trump isn't fighting hard enough, that he should be using every tool to punish Scotland for daring to enforce their own laws. Things became even more intense when Warren Buffett, the most respected investor in America, someone worth nearly $700 billion, someone Trump has actually praised in recent years, broke his decades-long pattern of public silence on political issues. Buffett said in an interview with CNBC that what Scotland did represents government overreach in its purest form, and that this is exactly what happens when institutions weaponize enforcement against individual citizens. Buffett's statement carries enormous weight because he's nobody's partisan. He's donated to candidates across the spectrum. When someone as apolitical as Buffett says the seizure is unjust, it resonates differently than Trump's own defense would. The Scottish seizure also triggered immediate legal challenges. Trump's US-based legal team filed emergency motions in federal court arguing that the Scottish action violated international property rights and created conflicts with US federal authority. According to documents filed in New York federal court on March 9th, Trump's lawyers contended that a foreign government's seizure of US citizen assets sets a dangerous precedent. Federal Judge Patricia Wald, reviewing the emergency motion, issued a statement that was notably cautious. This court recognizes the serious international implications but cannot enjoin actions taken by a foreign government within their own jurisdiction. Translation: a U.S. federal court has no power to stop Scotland, and Trump has no legal remedy here. Legal experts were quick to note that we haven't seen this kind of direct confrontation between a U.S. president and a foreign government's enforcement apparatus in modern times. Conservative legal analyst Andrew McCarthy, who's defended Trump in multiple previous controversies, went on Fox News and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that the precedent here is devastating because if Scotland can do this, then any government can, and Trump has no institutional protection when he's a private citizen. Think about that for a moment. This is coming from McCarthy, someone who's typically sympathetic to Trump's side. Constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe, speaking to CNN, mentioned that this exposes a fundamental vulnerability in the American system. The president's personal assets can be targeted by foreign governments in ways that a normal citizen might not face, precisely because a president has enemies in multiple countries. When legal experts from both sides start tossing around terms like unprecedented and institutionally damaging, that's the moment to really pay attention. So let's break down what this means because it's not just a captivating legal story. It has serious consequences for how American power operates globally. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant backlash due to ongoing investigations, and his approval ratings are taking a hit. Republican representatives are getting anxious about the 2026 midterms, which is adding to the tension. The idea that Trump's personal empire can be dismantled by a foreign government is not the look Trump wants right now. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for property rights and the rule of law, even if they don't always agree with every government decision. Democrats will definitely take advantage of this. They'll argue that Trump's refusal to accept any institutional constraints has consequences, and now we're seeing those consequences materialize. You can expect to see this scenario in campaign ads and speeches next cycle. Now, let's talk about what this means institutionally. The central question here is whether foreign governments will feel emboldened to seize assets of American citizens, particularly if those citizens have political power. If Scotland gets away with this without any real American pushback, other countries might follow. China could seize assets of American business interests. European countries could use tax enforcement as a political tool. That fractures America's ability to project power and protect citizens abroad. The real question is whether the global system of property rights and diplomatic protection still functions when the target is a U.S. president personally. This situation shines a massive spotlight on whether governments can enforce laws equally or whether political enemies get special treatment. At the heart of the issue is whether a president can simply refuse to accept legal determinations from legitimate authorities. If Trump successfully fights this through public pressure or political maneuvers, it signals that institutional enforcement only works against ordinary citizens, not powerful ones. But if Scotland succeeds, it establishes that no one, not even a U.S. president, is above law enforcement. That's a principle worth defending, but it's one that fundamentally constrains executive power going forward. Looking ahead, each time Trump brushes aside institutional norms, it weakens democratic systems globally. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. If Trump can defy Scottish tax authorities, what's to stop the next leader from doing the same? If he can just refuse enforcement whenever it suits him, what's to prevent another leader from following that lead? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office. They become part of our new reality. And that's pretty dangerous because democracy relies on those norms and institutions, assuming people in power will play by the rules, even when it's inconvenient. Looking toward the 2026 midterms, it's clear this is going to influence how things unfold. We're less than 2 years out, but the narrative being set now matters enormously. If the story is one of Trump's empire being dismantled by foreign governments while he's unable to protect his own interests, that spells trouble for Republican momentum. Voters usually don't reward chaos and vulnerability. They want strength and competence. Right now, Trump is demonstrating neither. He's showing weakness against an adversary he can't defeat through courts or political pressure. Democrats will champion a message focused on restoring institutional strength and the rule of law. After years of institutional strain, there are voters who believe if they elect someone committed to democratic norms, institutions might actually start working again. So here's the deal. 1 minute ago, Scottish authorities seized 2 of Trump's most important properties. This isn't just about real estate or tax disputes. It's about whether American presidents are subject to the rule of law when they're private citizens, whether foreign governments can enforce justice against American interests, and whether the global system of property protection still exists. If Trump can't recover these properties, if they're sold off to satisfy Scottish claims, then we're basically saying that institutions and law matter more than personal power. That would be a historic moment, but it's one that fundamentally changes how the world views American strength and American citizens' protection abroad. The stakes are bigger than just Trump's golf courses. They're about whether we genuinely have rule of law that applies equally, or if we're just stuck with whoever can fight hardest and leverage their power most ruthlessly. The next few weeks are going to be crucial as Trump's legal team explores every possible avenue: diplomatic pressure, federal intervention, court challenges, international arbitration. But the reality is unavoidable. A foreign government just took his property, and there's very little he can do about it. The stakes have never been higher, the precedent stronger, and the outcome more unpredictable. This is just beginning. Keep watching.